In today's episode, I am chatting with Emma. This is the first part of Emma's pregnancies and birth stories, and she takes us through the birth of her son. Emma took quite a dive into her motherhood journey when 6 months into her new relationship, she found out she was pregnant right after finishing her degree and starting a new job. And this was all quite a shock, but a pleasant surprise for Emma, who was just excited to be a mum and decided to go along with it. Being a first-time mum and not knowing much about pregnancy and her birthing options, Emma just decided to have her antenatal care and birth her son at the local hospital nearby where she was living. And Emma tells us that this was quite a positive experience for her, but reflecting back, she realized that throughout her labor, and even when she was in hospital, she felt like she did it all on her own and didn't really get much outside help. And this played a major role in Emma's decision when it came to the birth of her daughter. The other thing we chat about in this episode is how Emma navigated her postpartum journey and the role that her mother instinct had in helping her to find her way as a parent and decide what she felt was right to do with her son. And in this regard, Emma's got some really beautiful and empowering messages for everyone out there. So I will leave you with her episode, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. You are listening to Cuppa with a Doula. I'm your host, Alicia, exercise physiologist and doula. And every week I chat with a mum or mum-to-be about all things pregnancy, birth, and parenting. The stories you will hear in this podcast are real and sometimes raw, but they are all told without any taboo. So grab yourself a cuppa, put your earphones in, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Do you want to start by introducing yourself? So telling the listeners your name, where you're living, and who is in your family.
So my name is Emma. I am living on the Sunshine Coast in Palmwoods, and I've got a 6.5-year-old and a 3-month-old.
Wow. And we'll get into as we just spoke about before, the uncommon age gap that is having children 6 years apart.
Yep, definitely.
Amazing. So let's dive straight into it, Emma. Did you always want to be a mum?
I knew, yes, I did from a very young age. And I always thought I would be a young mum. But then when it actually happened, I wasn't quite expecting it. So my first was quite a big surprise. I was, only dating. Well, I'm still currently with my partner now, but we'd only been dating for about 6 months and then I fell pregnant. Oh. So it was kind of like, this awkward time of like, okay, is this like the best timing for us? You know, is this meant to be? And I've kind of always been the person that if it's meant to be, it'll just be. So I was like, right, well, it's obviously happened for a reason. So we'll just ride that. And, you know, if it's going to be a viable pregnancy, we'll just let it all unfold. So, wow. Yeah, that was my journey into motherhood.
That is absolutely amazing. And obviously it's amazing to hear that you're still with, you know, your partner, husband now.
Yeah.
Because that could have been a big deal breaker, obviously.
Oh, 100%, definitely. And I mean, it's definitely made us grow a lot as our relationship has progressed.
Had you, like the two of you, already spoken about kids? I mean, you'd been dating for 6 months. Had it come up?
No, I mean, to be honest, I can't actually remember if we had like that proper chat. Like I think we both eventually wanted kids, but it was so like still like honeymoon period that it wasn't really. I was only 23 and Jake, he's 4 years older, so he was 27. So I guess it's, you know, not really the first thing you're going to jump into. You kind of think about, you know, engagement and marriage first and then maybe talking the kids sort of chat. But yeah. So
had you, I guess maybe that's a difficult question to answer, but back then when you've been dating for 6 months, were you seeing, you know, that this could be a longer term relationship and you felt like he could be a good, you know, father to your children?
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, it was like, even though it was only quite short, like I guess when I did fall pregnant, it was kind of like, well, at least I knew that he was a really supportive partner and things like that. So it wasn't like it was one of those honeymoon sort of flings and you kind of 6 months in and then you kind of go, oh, maybe that's not that. But yeah, I could definitely see long-term sort of stuff. So I guess that's just the universe kind of being like, it's going to work out.
That is so good that it worked out. And what a dive into motherhood. I mean, you said, oh, I thought I'd be a mom at a younger age. Did you imagine 23 being young, or did you imagine maybe 20, I don't know, 25, 26, so on?
Yeah, at that time in my life, I did not expect to be a mother. But when I was a lot younger, talking maybe when I was like, 8 or 9, and you sort of think like, yeah, I'm going to be a young mum one day. Yeah. When you've got no real idea of what that looks like. So I guess I kind of, lived up to that in a way. But when I was, just before I fell pregnant, I didn't expect that I would jump into motherhood so quickly. No.
Oh, wow. So you were 23, and I think you're an exercise physiologist. We've got that in common as well. So you not long finished your degree, right?
Yeah. So I literally graduated. What would have that been? At the end of 2015. And then got my first job out of uni in 2016, and then fell pregnant with him like in late December of 2015. So, and then had him in the 24th of September 2016. So I just started this job, and then they were about to put me full time, and I had to kind of have the chat. Like, I'd been hiding my pregnancy because I was like, do I tell them? Do I not tell them? And then, I think I told them at about 16 weeks because I was able to kind of conceal it quite a bit because I'm quite tall. And then I was like, look, I know you're about to, we were having an interview for them to kind of put me full time. And I was like, look, I probably should be honest here. I am actually pregnant. And, I was, I'd love to go full time, but I understand that will probably change things now. So yeah, that was interesting, kind of doing things a little bit backwards. And
wow. Yeah, it's as you said. I mean, when it's a surprise, it's just like, like you just go, oh, but what about my job? But what about this? But what about the house? And but then, as you said, it probably was meant to be, and everything fell into place. And then you've got Charlie now, so things worked out, obviously.
Exactly. So like I can't imagine how life would have panned out otherwise. But it's just amazing though. But at the time I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I've just got this job and just starting my career, and now I'm pregnant. Like, what does this all look like? Like, it's just was a bit of a whole upside down shift to my world, I guess.
It would have been. I mean, pregnancy is like it usually shifts your world even when you expect it. When you don't, and you've just started, as you said, as a health professional, and then you're settling into a relationship, and you're getting into adulthood, then you're like, whoa, this is a lot now. Well,
so it forced me to grow up very quickly, I think.
It would have. Did you know much about pregnancy, what to do in terms of model of care and stuff like that back then?
No, not really. I mean, in uni, we touched very briefly on some of our like developmental things and like motor control and things like that in kids. And that was probably about the most I'd sort of really thought about. That was literally just through study, and not even in that way at all of, pregnancy or what that looks like in terms of continuity of care and all that sort of stuff. So no, it was basically, I guess my understanding would be you'd go to the hospital and you'd have your baby, and that was that.
I mean, that's a good summary. Yes, for most people, yes. So, what an experience that would have been. So how did you navigate? I'm guessing you went first to your GP and then you kind of relied on them to help you figure out what to do, where to go and stuff? So I was lucky that where we were living, so we were on the Gold Coast at the time, and just down the road there was a GP, and he was an ex-obstetrician, so I thought, okay, he'll be the right person to go to, and he seems like he's got good reviews. So I went there, and initially I think I was only like 5 or 6 weeks, and the first appointment we were kind of in that like time of like, okay, are we actually going to keep this baby? Like, is this what we really want? And so that first appointment we were actually going to go there to talk about options and things like that moving forward. And then this GP was just like, he was so lovely, and he was an older
GP, and he was just like, congratulations, you guys are going to be the best parents. And I was kind of like, okay, so I guess we're doing this. Like, so it was that kind of made us kind of be like, okay, yep, this is happening. And then he knew the hospital system quite well, obviously being working through it. And so yeah, he was kind of like, all right, well, you've got either Tweed Hospital or the Gold Coast Hospital. Which one do you want the referral to? And I was like, Tweed is closer, I guess. So did that. And then, I pretty much did, that model of care? I think it was like shared GP care. So he still sort of saw me for pretty much my whole pregnancy. And then obviously towards the end, it was mostly just the midwives. And then I think I had like a couple of check-ins with him late on during the pregnancy. And then the rest was kind of, into the public hospital system. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, in shared care, at least you had a GP that knew about pregnancy, knew about tests and things that you can do or you can decline as well. And at least he could tell you like what to expect, maybe things to ask, the midwives and stuff. Whereas some GPs sometimes are a bit clueless about pregnancy. They're kind of like, oh, I don't know about pregnancy. Ooh, I'm not sure.
So no, it was good having him, obviously quite experienced in that area. But yeah, I guess I didn't really know any different at the time. I never really, being a 23-year-old, you don't really need a doctor all that often. And because I'd only just not long moved to the area, that I was like, right, he will be the first one that I go to. And he turned out pretty good. So
wow. Yeah. So you just found out you're pregnant, you've moved to a new area, you don't know any GPs, you don't know anyone. Wow. Okay. Yep. Oh.
Yeah. So that's how my journey started.
Wow. How during the pregnancy did you try to inform yourself about what to expect, how to feel? Not how to feel, but how you might feel. The different, the tests, like birthing options. Did you do education around that?
Yeah, so I guess that's one strength of mine, is that I'm a serial researcher. So yes, I did do a lot of research, but I feel like you can only read so many textbooks or, look up so many things online until you go through it yourself. It's a whole different experience. But yeah, I guess I kind of knew I wanted to have like the most natural birth as I possibly could in the hospital system, and started to look into, okay, what does that look like? So like delayed cord clamping and things like that. And then did want to have a water birth. So I guess I sort of just started, searching Google pretty much, and doing a lot of that sort of stuff. And then the only other education that we did do, when we got transferred to the hospital, they had a antenatal, class. Yep. So we did, I think there was 6 weeks of that. So we did that with the couple of the midwives. So that was good because, they were kind of more educating around like, okay, we got the tour of the hospital, like this is where you go. And then obviously like the actual physiological stages of birth and that. So I think I kind of had researched that, but it was good for Jake to kind of come along and, just see what it was all about as well. So yeah, that was pretty much how I kind of navigated that and researched and did that sort of stuff. Yeah.
And so from an exercise perspective, did you know how to, I guess, stay active, and what, obviously as the belly gets bigger, obviously your center of gravity changes. Did you know how to, I guess, modify, your exercise routine? I'm assuming you were exercising back then. Could have started there.
Yeah. No, so it was really good. When I did get that job straight out of uni, I was working in a private physio practice that had reformer Pilates. So that was amazing. So I just, was basically continued carrying on through that the whole pregnancy, and then obviously modified as I got into the later trimesters and things like that. But I guess it's one of those things, because I don't know about you and your degree, whether we did like very surface level stuff for pregnancy and exercise prescription and that sort of thing. It wasn't really a lot to kind of like, I guess you kind of had to do further research or further studies into that to kind of, feel confident with that. But I guess it was kind of good having myself as a guinea pig to kind of be like, okay, this feels good, this doesn't feel good, this is what's recommended, this is not what's recommended. So yeah, it was kind of a bit of I'd had the research, but then it was also like, okay, how does this feel for me? Is this feeling good? Am I enjoying this? And that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. And see, I mean, I've had the exact same experience as you in terms of uni. It's like we touched on pregnancy but we never actually really dived into it. And see, I was always fascinated by it, so I always did research. And then, as you said, there's only so much you can read, and you read the evidence and you understand it. But then when you've got an actual pregnant person in front of you, we know that some people will get, for example, they will get pubic symphysis pain, but other people won't get it at the same, at the same pregnancy stage. So that, you can learn about it. You can learn that, you shouldn't do one-legged exercise, blah, 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 in the third trimester. But then you've got some women that they've got literally no pain. They've got no restrictions. Yeah. So it's very, as we've learned, it's not one size fits all. It's, you learn the evidence and the theory, but then when you see the person, sometimes it can look very different.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And that was kind of what it was for me. Like, I guess I was lucky. I carried really well with Charlie, and like a lot of things I was still really quite comfortable doing. I didn't really, like, even towards the end stages, like, I mean, obviously I modified a little bit, but it wasn't as much as what I thought I would have to, given, some of the theory stuff that I'd had read. I guess I was lucky that, my body just really responded well to pregnancy. And I was lucky. I pretty much had a pain-free pregnancy in terms of no aches or pains, no nothing. So that was amazing.
Yeah. And, we know that staying active during pregnancy also helps. But in saying that, you've got examples of women that stay active all throughout their pregnancy, and they still get, they still get backache, they get SI joint pain, they get pubic symphysis pain. So, I mean, pains and aches, to be expected, but not everyone will have them. So, case by case, really.
So that was, I was kind of a bit shocked, because I remember in that antenatal class that I was in, I think there was about 8 other mothers, and all of them are kind of like, towards the end, they're like, oh, I'm just feeling so heavy and I've got all this pain, and I'm just kind of like bouncing around like, I feel great, this is good. And they're like, oh my God. Mind you, like, I probably was a lot younger. Like, I think I was like 10 or 15 years younger than some of these women. So age also really helps, I think.
I think it does. Yeah, I really think it does. I mean, how would you know any different? I mean, if you had maybe a child early on and then a child maybe later on, but lots of factors. But
I can tell you, between Charlie and Daisy's pregnancy, I definitely noticed those 6 years difference.
Oh, we'll get into that then.
Yes, yeah.
So you felt amazing, you stayed active, you educated yourself. So what happened in the days and I guess weeks leading up to Charlie's birth? How was that?
Yeah, no, that was really great. Like, I literally worked right up until I think 38 weeks.
Wow,
so
nice.
Life was pretty much just continuing on as per normal. Didn't really have to cut down too much on work. Was pretty much working full time right up until then. And then that 2 weeks, like, that I obviously went on maternity leave, and then I just kind of was at this point, like, I didn't know what to do with myself. And then I was so busy with work and that, and then it kind of went into like, okay, I'm going to be a serial nester, and getting all that sort of sorted. And then I was also sort of at that point where I'm like, okay, I didn't really know at what point to expect to go into labor, like they say any time from sort of like 38 weeks, or some people say 36 weeks or whatever. So you're kind of like, well, I could technically have a baby at any time now. So you're just kind of preparing yourself, and you're just kind of tuning into your body and like, am I feeling anything different? What's up? But so those couple of weeks leading into it, I guess it's a very interesting time. Like, it's, you're anticipating Bubba's arrival, and then also kind of like, you've got all this time and you're like, okay, what am I going to do? And it was a very interesting time.
I mean, there's only so much nesting you can do, and it usually takes you like maybe a few days at most, and then you've got like 2 weeks up your sleeve, and you're like, okay, well, I mean, today, so I've cleaned the toilet, I've gone on a walk, I've made dinner for the freezer, I've had a nap, what next?
So, exactly. So no, it was very much like that kind of, almost like Groundhog Day, and it's like, okay, now I'm just waiting for this baby, it's imminent arrival. Like,
I found the waiting as well to be a bit of a limbo time, where, like, especially when you're on maternity leave, so you in a sense got nothing to do, really. I mean, I had nothing to do personally, and you're like, okay, so I could have this baby now, and then I was like, well, the house is prepped, like, I don't know what else to do, I've cleaned everything, and you're just sitting around going, okay, am I feeling, oh is that something, oh no, that wasn't it, no, okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a
Yeah,
really interesting time, isn't it? And I kind of guess it's almost like we don't know what to do with ourselves when we're not
yeah,
busy. It's,
yeah,
yeah, a
yeah. That's right.
very strange, yeah, it's, I can't explain it, I guess. It's just that void of time.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly how I felt, and I was the same because I'm
Yeah,
like, society tells you you need to be busy, women need to be busy
yeah,
multitasking, blah blah blah. They need to be working, and then it's like you go on maternity leave, and and you're like, okay, I'm going on maternity leave because, well, I need to finish work, and then I
yeah,
need to have this baby at some point, and the time that as you said, you finished at 38. I mean, you can have a baby at 42 weeks. That's a whole
yeah,
month there.
exactly. Yeah,
um yes, if we don't have work, I feel like we just go, okay. And especially when you don't have other children, like it's your first,
mm,
because if you have other
yeah,
children, then it's like, okay, well, I'll be full-time, caring for them, or they'll go to
yeah,
daycare or whatever. But when
yeah,
you've only got yourself and your partner, you're like, cool, the house is clean, yep, nice. What else to do? And I found it, I don't know
yeah,
about you, but I found it also really, really just limbo, because, well, my partner was going to work and I was just home doing nothing.
yeah,
And I'd be like,
yeah.
this just doesn't feel right. I don't know. Something just doesn't feel right here.
Yeah, I can't even remember when Jake actually finished work and had some time off. I don't think he finished as early as me. I think he kind of maybe, because he was shift working at the time. So yeah, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
he was sort of like pretty much right up until the due date sort of working. And then I think maybe the couple of days before he'd had that off, and then that was his time off. So yeah, at
Yeah.
least that was those couple of days. But yeah, otherwise I know what you mean. You kind of just on your own and you're like, this is very foreign. I don't know what to do. And then obviously all my other friends would be at work and you're kind of like, okay, I
Yeah.
can't just call up and be like, hey, come have lunch, come have a coffee. Like, so yeah.
And I'm guessing your friends would have been around the same age as you, so not having children yet. Is that
Yeah,
right?
correct. Yeah. So that was really interesting to see. Obviously, once I'd had Charlie, how like those dynamics and friendships kind of shifted because,
Yeah.
I knew I had very little to do with, my friends having babies and things like that. So I probably wouldn't have known how to support a new mum or,
Yeah.
what to do with that too. So that's, a whole other side of motherhood too.
Yeah,
It's very
definitely.
interesting.
So you were ready for Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Yeah.
you go into spontaneous labor with him?
Yes, I did. So I kind of got to, I had a midwife appointment on the Friday. So this must have been on the 23rd of September, and his technical due date was the 25th. And I remember the midwife was like, okay, everything's looking great, all's going well. But if you do go over into next week, I'm going to get you to book in with the obstetrician to talk about the next sort of stage and induction and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, wow, this is, I'm not even at due date. And they were sort of already mentioning that. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try and have this baby over the weekend because that's just not an option. And she's like, go home, set the mood, get the oxytocin flowing, and, that'll bring on baby. And I was like, okay. So that's what we tried to do. We went home, we tried to have a romantic little date night, which, was burgers on a nice
Perfect.
lookout by candlelight. So I was like, well, this will do. And then, we got home that night, and then what happened next? We went to bed, and then I got up, and then I kind of like stood up out of bed, and then my water's broke, and I was like, oh, did I just wee myself, or was that like
Wow.
my water's breaking? And then was kind of obviously hadn't experienced that before, so I was like, righto, well, I better just call the hospital and just let them know. And they were quiet on the wards, and we only lived 3 minutes away from the hospital, so she was like, just come in and we'll just double check that it's the fluids that have broken, and we'll just have a look and test and whatever else. And she's like, how are you feeling otherwise? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine, like no contractions, no nothing's changed. So that was at about 11 o'clock on the Friday night that happened. And then we went to the hospital. They'd confirmed, yep, okay, it's definitely the waters have broken. And they're like, well, if you're not feeling anything else, then you may as well go home and get some rest. And, in the morning, come back and we'll just see where you're at with everything, and we'll work out a plan from there. And I was like, okay. So went home and then tried to go to sleep. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I feel like I'm getting cramping. And it's like, oh, is something happening? And then, it slowly started to ramp up, and that so-called sleep I was going to have just didn't happen.
Oh.
So yeah, it sort of just started, spontaneously like that. And then we pretty much stayed at home until about 5 a.m. and things started to get pretty intense. That's when with Charlie, as soon as I sort of started to get my first lot of, like, after it went from sort of cramping to more contractions and surges, I started to throw up, and that was one thing that I was not prepared for at all. And I hate vomiting. I'm not a vomiter. And so I all of a sudden was running to the toilet, throwing up, and then also started to have it from the other end and diarrhea.
Oh, God.
And then things were starting to intensify, and I'm like, what is going on? I'm not prepared for this. Wow. So I remember calling, the midwife unit again, because they give you this hotline to call. Well, it goes directly to the actual midwives in that hospital. And they were like, no, that's great. Things are progressing really well. You're doing great. And I was like, what do you mean I'm doing great? I'm throwing up and I've got diarrhea and I've also got labor pains. Like, this is not great. I'm not expecting this. Like, so yeah. And by this point, it's, it must have been probably between 2 and 3 in the morning. And so I hate vomiting. So I go to Jake. I'm like, Jake, I need you to go to 7-Eleven and get me some Gatorade. That was the only thing I could think of that would, be somewhat helpful. Yeah. And he, I think 7-Eleven is literally, like, by the time you drive down there, it's no more than a minute drive. And it felt like when he left, it felt like he was gone for hours. And I remember I ran the bath because I was like, I just need something to just kind of chill me out. I was in the bath. And yeah, he reckons he was gone for like 5, maybe 10 minutes tops. And I reckon it felt like an hour. And I was just like, as soon as he got back, I'm like, we have to go. So we, packed up and went to the hospital, and lucky we're obviously quite close. So this is pretty much the sun is rising at this point. And I remember when we went to antenatal class, the midwives were like, now there's a specific spot you've got to park, don't park in emergency or get a parking fine. And, if you come in after hours, so it was still technically after hours. So we did have to present to emergency first. And then Jake was like, oh, well, we can't park here. So we better go and park around the back. And it was like the longest walk of my life. And I was like, hindsight, he should have just dropped me off, but then I kind of didn't want to go in on my own. I wanted him to come with me. So he's like, okay. And then there was like no car parks anywhere. So we parked all the way around the back of this hospital. And then I remember just kind of, being quite livid at this point and was like, oh my God, I can't even. And then it was such a long walk. And then when I got into emergency and, they phoned up the maternity ward and they were like, yep, no, we know she's coming. Yep, send her up. And then as you're going up to this ward, there's like 50,000 stairs. And I think I don't know how many contractions I had up along the stairs, but the midwife said to me as soon as I actually got up there, she's like, we watch on camera as women are coming into the unit, how many contractions they have up those stairs and if we're going to send them home or not. And she's like, so how many contractions did you have? It looks like you're quite intense and, things are starting to happen. And I was like, yeah, a few. And I'm here and I'm kind of like in this state of, still, I think I had a towel wrapped around my body. I don't think I had any pants on at this point. And we're literally walking up along, I don't know if you're ever familiar, but Tweed Heads Hospital is right on the Tweed River, and there's literally people walking their dogs, going for their morning walk, and we pulled up. I've got a towel wrapped around me. I don't even know what top I had on, probably just whatever I threw on, and I'm kind of moaning and groaning and doing this walk into the hospital. So God only knows what those poor people walking their dogs in the morning were thinking.
So they don't do elevators at Tweed Head. They have to have stairs. I mean, it's helpful for labour.
I don't know. I didn't get the option, so I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm sure they do have an elevator option, but I think they just like to try and, get women to get baby to drop that little bit lower from the stairs. So,
oh, great. Thanks.
So no, that definitely sped things up for me, that's for sure.
Yeah, I could only imagine at this point.
And then, we got there and things were pretty intense by that point, but then they sort of did slow up. So, we arrived at about 5:30 a.m. This is now on the Saturday. And, I was just kind of riding out the surges, doing really well. I had a student midwife as well with me.
Nice.
So she had come, and then otherwise in the early couple of hours, I really didn't see the other midwives at all. They were just kind of popping in. Oh, how's everything going? I'm like, yep, good, I think. Like, just kind of going on through. And I guess I probably got into the bath pretty early with Charlie, and that probably was to my detriment because that kind of really stalled things. Yeah, and then from there I could kind of see, it's this weird thing. Like, I was in the pool, things were kind of stalling, and then they were like, okay, we'll get out, we'll have you on the monitor, because they thought Charlie was having a deceleration. And then they were like, okay, we'll have to get out of the bath for this, blah, blah, blah. You might be able to get back in the bath after. But then once I got out, like, it just kind of, yeah, I don't know, like it sort of stalled for a bit, and then I was on the bed trying to ride through some contractions. And then the other thing as well that I should mention, I wanted my mum there for my birth, and she was travelling up from Sydney, and Sydney to Tweed Heads is about 10 hours or more, if that's if you don't stop.
If you don't stop, yes.
Yeah. So they had left on Friday afternoon, and they were going to stop. Their plan was to stop and stay halfway. And then I messaged mum that night. I was like, oh, my waters have broken. Nothing's happened. The hospital's told me to go home. And then, like, I'm like, don't worry, like, it's all fine. And then she got this motherly instinct and intuition in the morning to get up at like 4 a.m. and she's like, Will, we've got to, like, my dad, she's like, we've got to go, we've got to just start driving. So they started driving, and then they were literally on this race against the clock. So at this point, Jake has, like, been in communication with them saying, like, we're at the hospital, things are happening, blah, blah, blah. By this point, I've had to get out of the bath, and I think mum just got there just as they got me out of the bath. And the midwives were like, you've just been waiting for your mum, haven't you? And then as soon as mum got there, then things started to, like, just take off again. And then my dad was actually there as well, because he'd just dropped mum off, and he was kind of like, well, do I stay, do I go? And I was like, I don't care, like, whatever. And so at this point I'm on the bed, they've got me on the monitor, and I'm pretty much in, like, active labor, like Nelly about to push sort of thing. And so mum's literally got there at probably about 11 o'clock, and I ended up having Charlie at 12 o'clock or 12:18. So it was very quick from then getting there. And then, dad was kind of like, well, I may as well just stay and wait then. So my mum and my dad were in the room, and Jake, and then we had the student midwife. So it was quite a bit of a crowd there. And then, I remember being on the bed. I guess that was one thing I didn't really research too much, which, I'll speak into as I talk about Daisy's birth, but kind of didn't do enough research on birthing positions. I guess I had been put in this situation. I'm kind of at the point where I'd been labouring. I obviously was still quite a short labour, but I was pretty exhausted, not having any sleep that night. And so by the time we've sort of hit that point, they're kind of saying that I'm failing to progress. I've got to get out of the pool, the birth pool, come up onto the bed. And I just kind of was like, okay, whatever. I was at that point, like, just do whatever. I don't care. I just want this baby out. And so I'm on the bed, and then they were like, well, I think you're starting to, like, they were starting to kind of coach me through pushing and breathing through each contraction. And then I had a midwife on either one of my legs. They had like that big mirror in front of me so I could see, because they're like, do you want to see? And I was like, yep, that'll give me, like, when I see the head, like, inspiration to push. And obviously knowing now, like, birthing on my back is not a great birthing position. And it kind of, the pushing stage, I think, ended up going for about, I'm going to say maybe 40 minutes. And I feel like when Charlie finally started to crown, like, it just took forever in that, like, ring of fire. And I was just sitting in that being like, oh my God. And, we wanted some photos and stuff taken, and the midwives were like, okay, Jake, get down near the head. And they're like taking photos. And I'm just like, are you kidding me right now? Like, I'm sitting in this ring of fire and you're taking photos. I was like, get this baby out of me. And she was just like, looked at me and she was like, oh no, honey, you've got to wait for the next contraction. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm just sitting in this, and I'm like, oh. And then so I'm by this point just trying to do anything I can. So I pushed, like, as hard as I could, and then he came out, and in the process I tore quite badly. It wasn't the nicest experience there, but I was very lucky that I had no interventions, and then I had a natural physiological third stage as well. With the placenta. I didn't have what's the injection that they give you, the
Pitocin
for the placenta. I didn't have that, so I had a physiological third stage, and the placenta came out pretty much like half an hour after I had Charlie. And so I guess being a first-time mum, I didn't realise how rare this was to kind of navigate that hospital system and have an intervention-free birth.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So apparently now that I've been speaking to a lot more women, they're like, how? Like, I don't understand. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I just thought that was the norm and that's what you do.
But I mean, in your case, like, there was at no point does it sound like you needed an intervention. Like, it
No,
didn't
and I
sound
guess,
like...
yeah, the only closest thing I could, and I can kind of see where it could have potentially gone into that cascade of intervention when they got me out of the bath and when they wanted me to go on the monitor because they were worried about him going into fetal distress. Turns out when they put the monitor on, it was just a deceleration and everything was fine. But I could see how that could have quite easily gone into, okay, you're failing to progress, we're going to get you out of the bath. And then, you know, if I was in that pushing stage any longer, there probably could have been, you know, more push for, okay, maybe we'll need to do an episiotomy or, you know, whatever else it might have been. But yeah, I was really grateful and lucky that I am a pretty determined person, and when someone says I need to get this baby out, like, I will do it. So
Nice.
I think that mindset definitely helped make that happen.
Wow. So how did you feel? You know, Charlie is on you. How are you feeling? How is Jake feeling as well, I guess?
So I was in I've got this photo of me literally as I've just getting, I think the midwife had passed him to me, or Jake. I don't know if Jake or the midwife, can't quite remember. But anyway, someone's passed me him and put him on my chest. And I've just got this like awkward hands, didn't know what to do. I've got this like real weird look on my face. I'm like, there's this slippery baby on me. Like, this is like, what is happening right now? Like, I was kind of in shock that, you know, I just like, this thing had come out of me. And then it was just, I can't even describe it. I was just in such shock, I think, that it was like a bit surreal to be like, oh my God, I've got this baby and now this is my responsibility. Like, it was just, yeah, a very, very surreal moment of that point in time. Yeah, I just can't even put that into words. And that photo literally just says it all. It's like, yeah, I've kind of got this like real shock look on my face. I'm like,
It's like, so, what do I do now?
Yeah. And then I remember so from the reading and research that I'd done, I knew that I wanted to do delayed cord clamping. I knew I wanted skin to skin straight away after. So I had that all written down on a birth plan, and the midwives really respected that. And yeah, I basically got all those, that all went to plan. And then, yeah, he came straight over onto my chest. We had skin to skin, and then he pretty much did the breast crawl.
Oh, nice.
And I was kind of just, yeah, it was really interesting. Like, I just guess you just kind of let your intuition take over, and then obviously baby's intuition kicks in and they know how to find the breast, and they do that breast crawl, which is just, it's amazing that they have that innate wisdom and ability to do so. Yeah, like it was just a really interesting time. And then also I remember the midwives, I think I was lucky that they were quite hands off. I know some people have experienced where like the midwives are trying to get the baby to latch right on your boob and they're trying to like hold their head, and it kind of takes that, you know, that baby's awareness away from actually finding the boob themselves. So yeah, I was really lucky that, yeah, they just sort of let me do my thing. And then from that point, I feel like it was just really crazy, because then I literally had so many people come and visit me in hospital. Like, it was, then Jake's parents came like literally a couple of hours after, and, you know, that happened. And then yeah, obviously my mum and dad were still in the room, and then I think my auntie and my cousin came, I think my nan came. Like, it was just this real, like, it was just crazy. Like, it was so overwhelming. Like, I think about it now and I'm like, oh my God, like, that is just so full on to have just gone through what you've gone through, and then just have all these people come in and, you know, want to see you, want to see the baby. And yeah, like, it was, I just guess I didn't really know any better or kind of prepare. I was kind of just like, yeah, whatever, like, come if you want. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, just this real blasé mindset about everything, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and that's, I think that's where, when we had the COVID, you know, and the lockdowns and that, that's where a lot of people then in disguise, that was a blessing, just that part, obviously not the whole COVID thing, because it was like, oh, you can't have visitors. And for some people, I mean, for some people, they want to have visitors straight away. But for others, sometimes it's hard to say no, especially to your family. Like, they want to come straight away, and you kind of not really want to say no. But then, like, you're kind of thinking if you could wait, it wouldn't be that bad, you know? And I mean, with those restrictions, it was like, well, you can't come anyway. So, So and just because
definitely, you know, was a positive for sure.
Yeah, and just because, like, as you said, you've gone through so much emotionally, like, you need to process that, you know, your pregnancy's over, you've got your baby, and now you're a mom. You've got to navigate, you know, early motherhood, early postpartum, and obviously you're exhausted. You might have, you know, maybe tears. You might be in pain. You might want to rest. You know, just having people is draining, really.
Yeah, definitely. No. And so I guess I didn't really, the one thing I guess with Charlie too, I didn't really prepare at all for postpartum.
Okay.
You know, I didn't know what it would look like in terms of visitors, how I wanted, you know, that to play out. I literally we were living in a 2-bedroom unit. And so after I think I spent 2 days in hospital. And then when I got home, I still had my mum, my dad, and then my nan also staying there. So nan was sleeping in the lounge room. Mum and dad were in the spare room, and me and Jake were in our room. And it was only a 2-bedroom unit. Like, it was just full on.
Yeah.
And I think about it now and I'm like, wow, like how did I cope with all of that? Like, I mean, I was just lucky that, you know, mum and that were amazing helpers. And, you know, obviously stepping into that early stage of motherhood, it was great to have them there. And, you know, mum cooked and did all that, so I didn't have to worry about that. But at the same time, it was pretty overwhelming because, you know, you've got people in your space too, and you don't really have that time to connect with just you and baby. And I remember it was really hard, like when mum did eventually leave after, I think she stayed with me for 2 weeks, I really found it hard, like going from all of a sudden having all these people there to then just being me and baby. That was kind of when it was like, oh my God, like this is real life. Like I'm the only one who is here now and looking after this baby. Like I'm in charge of this baby's life. Like that, I guess, was kind of, I remember I said to mum, I was like, I don't want you to leave. I can't do this. And then, so I think she ended up staying a little bit longer, like she extended a couple of days. And then I managed to be like, okay, no, I think I've got this. Like I can be okay. And then it was okay. But yeah, it was a really interesting time.
Yeah, and as you said, you just need that time when you come back from hospital or you have your baby at home, you know, whatever the situation is. You need time, whether that's your first or that's your third. You need time to find your marks, to connect with baby, to find, you know, all babies are different. You need to find, you know, what helps to settle my baby, what seems to trigger them, what's, you know, you need to figure out, obviously, feeding, naps, and having your space and just finding, you know, like your way is so important. And as you said, you had everyone there first, so you're kind of like, okay, well, at least, you know, mom's cooking and they're great because, you know, your mom and your nan, you know, they've been moms themselves, so you know, obviously that's great. But then they leave and you're like, I don't know how to do things on my own now. I haven't had to.
Exactly. So that was really interesting. And then I think Jake had 2 weeks off and then he went back to work. So then I was like, right, it's just me and baby. Like this, I was totally spun out into that overwhelm. But I think it was only for a couple of days, and then I was like, you know what, I've got this. I'm okay. I can do this. And obviously I did. 6 years on, kept him alive, so that's great.
You have. Amazing. Let's celebrate that. Every year I've kept him alive for another year.
Yes. No, but it's amazing though how your mother's intuition does develop. And I pretty quickly found out I didn't want to take too much, like even having mum and nan there in that initial part, you know, they would say things like, oh, back when I was, you know, I had your I used to do this and you did this, and it was really hard to kind of say, okay, well, you know, that worked for them, but that's not really how I want to do things. Or, you know, like you have all these people throwing these solutions at you when something inside of me was kind of like, no, I don't actually agree with that, or, you know, I don't think I want to go down that path, or whatever it might have been. So I think I was lucky that I guess my intuition really kicked in, and that really kind of was evident when I had this 6-week, maternal health nurse appointment. I remember I went there. I hadn't been to this particular clinic before. It wasn't obviously attached to the hospital. It was kind of this like own little health unit thing. And I went to this appointment, and this lady, I think she was I don't know if she was a midwife or one of the child health nurses. I'm not 100% sure, but anyway, she was starting, like, so my baby's 6 weeks old, and she was starting to be like, okay, we're going to start looking at sleep training, and what are you doing? You know, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm feeding my baby to sleep. That seems to be working pretty well. He's sleeping well. And she's like, oh no, we can't get into that habit. We're going to have to start sleep training. And so she gives me this like handout about sleep training. And then she's like, okay, and you know, what else is going on? You know, otherwise he's healthy and well, blah, blah, blah. And then I was, oh, that's right. My mum was coming back for a visit, and she goes, okay, so just make sure that when your mum's here that she doesn't hold him too much, that, you know, he doesn't want to get too spoilt and this and that. And I was just like, is this woman for real? Like, it just rang up all these alarm bells, and I was like, okay, no, this is not how I started mothering. And I was like, I don't agree with what you're saying. I kind of was in this really interesting point. So I came home from that appointment kind of feeling a bit deflated, being like, oh, okay, well, whatever I've been doing, obviously my baby's not doing well, and this is not what I'm supposed to do. And then I started to like look at that sheet, and, you know, Charlie was sort of a bit unsettled. So I'm like, all right, I'll try some of the things she said. And I remember doing it for like one of his naps, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this. I'm just going to give him the boob and he'll just fall asleep. And, you know, that was that. And so I was like, okay, I never went back to any more of those appointments. I was like, that just, I can't even. I was like, I don't agree with anything that you're telling me. That just feels really wrong with me and my body and my baby. And I'm just lucky that I had that strong intuition kind of kick in, whereas I feel like that's where I've sort of seen, and, you know, even now with some of my other mum friends, especially first-time mums, as they're sort of like going through their journey, I'm kind of their fallback person, because obviously I had babies a lot earlier than them, that they're kind of like, oh, I'm going through this, what's going on, blah, 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 they said this. And I'm just like, well, what do you think? You're the person who knows you and your body and your baby best. Like, just trust that. And I was just so shocked at how many people didn't have that same trust within themselves. So yeah, I kind of really praise myself on having that, and really being able to trust that what I was doing was working, that it was fine for me and Bub, and, you know, he was healthy, he was well, we were doing all the right things, he was feeding really well. Yeah, so I can see how women can kind of fall into that pattern, and then, you know, that can also lead, had I sort of listened to that sleep training sort of thing, you know, maybe that could have inhibited my breast milk supply and things like that, if I was kind of doing this weird like shushing and patting or whatever it was, instead of feeding to sleep or feeding. Oh, that's right. And she wanted me to start routine feeding and not demand feeding as I was. And I was like, that could have been so detrimental to my supply and all that sort of thing had I have actually stuck to that. And you can see how some women's breastfeeding journeys end early because of, you know, some advice, you know, that might work well for some women for sure, but for others that could be, you know, extremely detrimental. So
yeah, and
it's just crazy.
That's
now that
really interesting. Yeah, and I think it's the same thing you mentioned with, you know, your mom or your nan giving you advice and saying, oh, you know, I did that with your mom, I did that with you. There's a lot of advice that, you know, some parents, some midwives even, or some maternal child health nurse have learned that I think are really outdated. And I don't know if they know that it's outdated. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But, and that's the problem, you know, like, because as you said, you know, as a first-time mom, obviously you don't know what you don't know, and you want to rely on, you know, you want to take in advice, you want to go, oh, okay, yeah, you've done that, okay, that worked, and because, you know, you just want to try things. And when people like, you know, that nurse tells you, oh, you need to do sleep training, you need to do like, you know, schedule feeding, then you go, you obviously didn't think, oh, yeah, I need to do that. But some first-time moms would, because they go, well, you're a health professional, you obviously know
best.
more than me. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, as you said, it's about your intuition, what feels right, but also what works for you, because as you said, you know, sleep training, it has a time and a place, I think, but not at 6 weeks. At 6 weeks, we know that a newborn needs their mom and their dad, obviously, and they need to be close to you, and they need to contact nap, and they need to feed all the time because their stomach is small. We know that. You know, if you came to that nurse and you said, oh, I'm going back to work soon and I'm feeding my baby to sleep right now and I need to find something else because soon that baby's going to be at daycare and obviously they can't feed the baby to sleep at daycare, what can I do? Then that would have been a different story. It could have been like, oh yeah, you can try shushing, you can try this, you can try padding, you know. There it could have had, you know, time and a place at a different age, but without any, you know, unsolicited advice, basically, when your baby is doing well and you're not asking for anything, is not, and especially as a newborn, we know that, I spoke about it in another episode, we know that African cultures and Middle Eastern cultures where they have the baby on them, they carry the baby, the baby is always in arms or in a sling or in a carrier, and we know that those babies are so settled. They, you know, the moms have great milk supplies, and you know, everyone is happy really because the baby is, you know, it's a continuation of the womb. Basically, the baby is just on the skin, can hear, you know, can obviously feel the heartbeat, can feel the warmth, can feed when needed, and we know that's the best approach. And I feel like as a Western society, we have a lot to learn from those cultures, and we're just
definitely.
starting to implement things like caring baby.
Yeah.
Which is a lifesaver, really. And it's so good.
No, and that's, definitely too, now with Daisy, like having followed a lot of those practices and things that you've just mentioned then, it's been such a different experience, and she is actually like the best baby in the world. Like, it's just crazy compared to what I sort of was just trial and error with Charlie and trying to work stuff out. And obviously we found our groove, but he was not a settled bub. But then I guess I probably was a little bit stressed out, and as you can be as a first time mum, and when new things pop up and arise, and babies pick up and amplify that sort of stressy energy. So it was interesting to sort of see, even though overall like he was still a really good baby as well, but now comparing the two, it's like I've just got this wonderful baby. It's just amazing.
And I think because I hear that a lot, and I think it's also, obviously as a first time mom, you're finding your marks, because even when you educate yourself, when you read the books, when you ask your friends, your mom, you try and get as much advice as you can, it doesn't beat having your baby in your hands, really, because all babies are different. So whatever worked for your friend's baby might not work for your baby. They might have a totally different personality. One might have colic, one not. One might have like reflux. One might just hate being put down. Like that's just babies. They're just different, right? And so you can't. I feel like you can only prepare so much. Like obviously you can learn, you can ask people, but then it's, as you said, I think it's trial and error. But I feel like when it's your second one, somehow you've just got more confidence, even though all babies are different, but you kind of go, well, I mean, I made it with the first one, so something worked, so I could do it. No, definitely. And I think that's the other thing now, having had that 6-year gap, like you obviously grow a lot as a person through motherhood, and then obviously the time too, I honestly couldn't imagine having babies close together. Like I think the way I've done it just seemed to have like really suited us and where we're at with life. And I just couldn't imagine having a toddler and then also a newborn. Like I take my hat off to women who manage to have close and small gaps and things like that. But for me, I just look at them and think like, nah, I could not deal. And Charlie was quite a high maintenance baby as well. So I was like, nah, there was no way like his attention would have gone to a new baby from him. Like it was just, he was not ready for that. So hence the gap. Interesting. How was your postpartum? So, physically, mentally, how did you navigate it?
So I guess it was pretty good, feeding and everything. Like we never had any breastfeeding issues. He literally, as soon as he latched, like he was a great feeder. That was amazing. He was a pretty good sleeper too. Overall, like, pretty good baby. Healing wise, having had the tears, like obviously that took a couple of weeks, but I pretty much just, I guess, like, I was young, I bounced back pretty quick. I probably didn't honor my postpartum period in terms of actually resting. I was pretty like, all right, I've had my baby, like a week later, I'm down going for a walk, getting coffee, like, whereas I just couldn't fathom doing that now after when I had Daisy. Like it was, two whole different things. And the more I sort of learned about that postpartum period and how that actually affects your healing and obviously all that sort of stuff, I really wanted to honor that a lot more the second time around. I guess that was one area that I kind of neglected a lot. And the other thing that happened in our postpartum period was I was pretty fine, but Jake actually ended up having a bit of postnatal depression. And I think that was due to the fact that we were still quite early on in our relationship, and I went from, him having all the attention, and it was almost like a second child sort of thing when I sort of look at it, is, he went from having all of me, and then, we're still in this new relationship, it's still all, we're figuring things out, to then we've got this baby, and, all my attention and focus has shifted to that. And so he kind of felt quite neglected and kind of a little bit resentful towards Charlie for that first part of postpartum period. And it was really quite amazing that, he actually did speak up about it. It was like, this is what I'm actually feeling. I'm starting to have these sort of, bad thoughts that I shouldn't be having. And so, so that was really interesting. I guess I didn't really think too much. And that's the other thing, is we kind of do neglect the partners as well. Like, they've obviously,
Definitely.
they go through a lot too. And I guess that was one thing I didn't really, know that could be an issue, or things could pop up like that. So we managed to get him through that point. And as Charlie got older and he sort of stepped into fatherhood a bit more, it kind of became a little bit easier. And we obviously got him some help and things like that. So I think that's important to mention too, because I think we obviously put so much focus too on the women, but the men also do go through quite a bit as well, coming into fatherhood. So
definitely. And see, I'm so glad. I hope Jake is okay with this being mentioned, obviously.
No, he talks about it. He likes to try and get it out there, and wants to make sure that other men are aware of, if they are having these kind of feelings, that it is normal. Well, it's not normal, but it can happen.
Exactly.
And to look out for that sort of thing popping up. And I guess that's one other thing, there's that whole stigma around men's mental health. They're meant to be the strong ones holding it together for everybody, but that's not always the case for some people. And
no, exactly. So. And it doesn't have to be. And that's the thing with, so mental health in itself is like taboo. We don't want to say that we're not doing okay. We don't want to say that there could be a problem or there is a problem. But then when it comes to men, that's even more taboo somehow, because as you said, they have to be strong. They have to be, the alpha male, whatever that is. And we don't talk about it, and I'm really glad you're mentioning it, because postnatal depression, it can affect the partner, whether that's it's a man or it's a woman. It can affect the partner as well, because it's a big transition. Even if it is your second or third child, you can still have postnatal depression, because it's about finding your place in the family, in the expanded family, and that can be really hard. And as you said, with Jake, you hadn't been together that long, and he had your attention, and then he didn't, and it's a big transition to become a dad, obviously. Like he, you're obviously doing all the feeding and all of that, but I mean, he's also taking care of Charlie, and he's like, oh, okay, this is a small baby, and then it comes with a lot of responsibilities, and it's newborn stage is really hard too,
especially for the males, like knowing that they don't have boobs and they feel kind of the way Jake used to describe it was like, he's like, I just feel useless to an extent. He's like, I can cuddle the baby and that, but it doesn't settle, and as soon as he goes to you and goes on the boob, it's like, that's the magic cure. So I think that was quite hard for him as well, realizing that he wanted to help and he was there, but he didn't have what Charlie was wanting at that time.
And see, that's challenging, but as you said, there is help out there for the partners who they didn't have the baby, but they've also got, we experience a drop in hormones after labor, so can the partners. And no one talks about that, but so can they, even though they haven't given birth, yes, but they are sleep deprived. They are trying to find their place. They are trying to, help. They are trying to find what's going to settle baby. That's, it is as important as the birthing mum's mental health, obviously. And there is a lot more community mental health services available for the parents, not just for the mum. So that, the partner who may not be doing so well, or may need to talk about their feelings, they may need reassurance. They may need to say, oh, is this normal that, I'm thinking that, I'm feeling this? Sometimes that's all you need. And other times they need more help, maybe medication, maybe strategies. They need to see a psychologist, counselor, psychiatrist, whatever it is, but there is help out there. So yes, it's very important to mention the partner can, their mental health can suffer, but there is help, and there is usually through the community child health nurse, or through the GP, or sometimes through, even if you've gone through the midwifery group practice, the midwife can sometimes help find appropriate services for the partner as well. So there is help. It's about reaching out to. It's about, and in Jake's case, he was really brave to tell you that he wasn't doing well, because sometimes that's the hardest step. It's to say, I'm not okay, and then to tell someone, so that help can be seeked, actually. Yeah, good on Jake. Thank you, Jake, for talking about this.
Yeah, no, I think that's been, something that he wants to try and get more men aware of and everything too. Obviously he's had that experience, and that's really important for him. So
how was your because you're an exercise physiologist, how was your pelvic floor and your return back to exercise? How did you find that?
So it was actually not too bad. I think I probably went a little bit too soon into things that I probably rushed myself. I was kind of like, no, my body feels good, I'm good, like blah blah blah. But later down the track, I'm talking maybe 6 months postpartum, that I was kind of like, actually no, I do have some stress incontinence and things like that, which was interesting, because then I guess that kind of made me, that's when I really started to shift my focus with the other options available for extra study and things like that. So I started this, external, lost for words right now, another course to upskill in pregnancy and postpartum. So professional development, that's what I was looking for.
There you go.
So it was more just not actually for my career as such. It was more for myself. I was like, I'm really interested in this. I want to learn more about this, how I can support myself and my pelvic floor and healing and all that sort of stuff. And then, because I also wanted to try to get back into running and things, and I was kind of like, well, this is limiting me, because now I'm either having to go to the toilet every 2 seconds so that I'm not leaking, and so I was kind of a bit in this phase of I should know this, I should have known better, blah blah blah. And then as I learned, but then I guess you don't know what you don't know. It was interesting learning, what I had done wrong and how to correct that. And second time around was definitely a lot more gentle in returning to exercise and, making sure that I'd really focused on building that pelvic floor strength again. I guess I was kind of, pretty blasé about it. But it was good that I did have that, obviously, clinical knowledge. But then at the same time, you can have this clinical knowledge, but then what you say and what you do can be 2 different things. So it was an interesting time, but I'm glad that I did upskill and learn a bit more about that to support myself. And
I think what you're saying might resonate a lot with listeners who you feel good postpartum, after probably a few weeks, and then you go, well, I can get back into what I was doing before, which, it could be CrossFit, could be running, could be, weight training, whatever. And then it's a trap that's too easy to fall into, to do too much too quickly, because you feel fine and you go, well, I just want to get back into it. And yes, exercise early on has a place, but it needs to be gentle. It needs to be, there's a lot of retraining to do in terms of, core strength and pelvic floor. And sometimes I find it's hard to get that message across, because the women feel fine. So they're like, well, I don't have any aches, I don't have any pains. It's fine. I can deadlift, I can do whatever. But it's easy to do too much too soon. And as you said, for you saw the consequences, 6 months down the track. It could have been a whole year down the track, and you could have never put the two together. You could have gone, I don't know, maybe it's just part of motherhood, which we know it's not. But
exactly.
I find that's a really good message you've just sent, that, it's obviously exercise has a place, but it needs to be gentle. It needs to be progressive, not just, I've given birth, I'm going to do my personal best. Maybe not the time just yet. And this is the end of the first part of Emma's pregnancy and birth story with her son Charlie. I hope you enjoyed it. She will be back next week with the second part, where she will take you through the free birth of her daughter Daisy. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to get notified of when a new episode comes out, please subscribe to this show on your podcast listening platform. Also, I would really appreciate it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcast, or share this episode so that other moms can find it. If you would like to tell your own pregnancy, birth, or parenting story, please head to the show notes and you will find a form there to get in touch with me. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will be with you again next week for a new episode.